Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Lee Ho-yi, a 26-year-old former pro gamer, was training in a dark hallway with a shield, and at one point we hit his leg and it seemed to disappear. The guy fell to the floor in pain, he was writhing in unbearable pain, and his leg was swallowed up by some dark matter. He needs to get back to the waiting room. He got to his feet with the help of his sword. This pain is very real. What will happen to him if he dies here? Now that he had obtained the first level pain resistance skill, would he really die so pitifully in this hole? No one will wait for this. The guy clenched his hand into a fist, and with the last of his strength stood up. Where exactly did everything go wrong? The answer is obvious. It was on the day the panel appeared in front of him. He had a choice of the level of difficulty of training. He chose the most difficult. It was not worth it to do this. The boy was still writhing in pain. He gained new next level combat resilience skills. What a nightmare. Was this really the end of him? His vision blurred. Even before that, he was sitting at home and watching some program on the computer. Everything is so boring. He finished the next and the next drink. That was 2 years ago, and there were a lot of boxes and trash in her room. He ended his pro career and opened a convenience store with his remaining savings. After that, he threw all the work on his employees, and he was holed up at home at this age. He is already retired in his own right. In those days, he was the greatest among pro players. Their world is too complicated with the time of the name. Even he overthrew from his throne. So he decided to completely stop playing video games, and now his life has turned into a complete boredom. The guy was indignant at how lousy everything is. Suddenly, breaking news was announced. Just 30 minutes earlier, many craters like the one they were watching on their screens suddenly began to appear all over the world. The government has already dealt with the consequences of this phenomenon. But what it was, experts recommend not to approach the area of occurrence of these craters. At this moment, a scoreboard appeared in front of him where he was invited to the world of learning. The guy was scared because he didn't know what it was. He even bounced off the table. What kind of training is this, a game? He was asked if he would be willing to enter the world of learning, but it seems that he has had a little too much. He is still imagining it. He is sure of it. The guy agreed, and a board with a choice of level popped up for him. Difficulty levels, as many as 4 options. He always easily managed to pass any games, so he chose the hardest, hellish difficulty level. The next moment, he woke up and someone was shouting at him to get up. There were many different men around. The guy got scared and started looking around. Where is he? This is the waiting room of the first floor of training. What is the first floor of training? What do these people even say? Let the guy calm down eventually. Didn't he see those messages, like a dashboard, talking about training and other things, didn't he? This is exactly what the guy didn't say, but as if he saw it, he was too drunk to understand the whole point. They were also thrown here after the appearance of these messages. He looked around, and even the girls were as ignorant as he was, and if he knew anything, he was asked to share it. If you think about it, in the news, they said about some funnels that began to appear around the world. Maybe this was the reason. What kind of craters did the other man say? What kind of nonsense is this? He wants to say that they were thrown here because of those holes. Not at all, but it's a suggestion. They might just calm down, said a third. But I asked the guy what was wrong. He was sure that he was drunk just a few minutes ago, but now for some reason he feels completely sober. Probably their bodies in this place recover faster than usual. How does it recover faster? What does this mean? Exactly what he said. He hasn't yet chosen a weapon for himself. What kind of weapon? And soon the hero will get it. He was asked to choose a starting weapon. A new notification came. The guy found himself in some place where everyone went. Is this an armory? He looked around. There were a bunch of different items. Starting weapons. Now everything is clear. These are the weapons issued by the game at the beginning of the passage. If this is really a game world, then the starting weapon can greatly affect its further development. You need to choose wisely. What should he choose? The hero wondered. He considered all the possible items. Thought for a start, he needed to decide with his game style. In such games, there are usually divisions between defense, attack, and support heroes. And among them, he needs to choose one thing. This will affect his skills, style of play, and even build up. He doesn't have much muscle mass, and he doesn't like magic, so heavy weapons and staffs won't work for him. Weapons for ranged combat, most likely they are quite difficult to use. This is a style and safer than other options, as it will be able to attack while maintaining a distance. But this is only on the condition that there is someone who will protect it, or in extreme cases there should be a lot of space for free movement. It also depends on his opponent. What if he has to fight not with monsters, but with those people who were in the hall? He believes that melee weapons are much better suited for all his tasks. He should have asked them what weapons the players had chosen. His head wasn't working as well as usual. They can either be on the same team or become enemies, and in the latter scenario, close combat is the best option. He doesn't have the faintest idea about this game, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be a hell of a challenge, just like he chose. Summing up all the results, it turns out that the best weapon for him is a sword and shield. He chose a dirty shield, which had a defense level of 5, but a leather belt is more effective than this shield. I also chose a child's shield, which had 3 damage points and was only suitable for children's training. They were all worn out, the worst items he could take, the rest of the weapons no better, a bow that might break at any moment, or an old axe. Whether he's sure he wants to choose this particular weapon, whether he should, but he chose these anyway. The guy again found himself in a room with those people. He was congratulated on his return. He decided on a choice, then the man will explain to him how. Before he could finish speaking, another person interrupted him and told him to stop, just let him leave this weakling alone. They're about to die of boredom, they can move around without giving up on this guy. Well, what does this mean? Does he have any problems? Does he want to feel his weapon on his skin? The man asked our hero. He was pulled apart by a dark-haired man and told that there were only 4 of them already, they should keep an eye on each other. The hero thanked him, but there are really only 4 of them. Are the players sure about this? This is a good question. It will explain everything to them from the very beginning. First, they will go through the functions. You need to look carefully. He opened the scoreboard. It was inventory. He should also try to do it. Inventory. The hero opened the scoreboard. It's just incredible. If he imagines putting a weapon in his inventory, then this will happen. You need to put it just like in video games. The hero did so. The weapon disappeared from his hands. And now they'll take a look at his status. The status was like this. His strength was 8, agility 13, health 10, and intelligence 21. Why is he so weak? But it's because he's still a rookie with a fairly high IQ. That's good. Now that he checked his status, it looked like he had chosen the wrong weapon. Now the phone is a special window where he can correspond with people from other rooms. Well, what about the other rooms? This means that they were distributed according to the level of difficulty. The number of people is also written here. There were a lot of people in the other levels, but there were only 4 in the infernal one, only 4 in the infernal room. The man chuckled, and the other players looked at him, and if that's all, it means they have to keep an eye on each other. As well as the last hours, they will appear if the hero swipes his finger on the screen cursor. He did so, with 70 hours and 43 minutes to go. They still had 3 days to go. Inventory, character window, it's all very similar to an RPG game. They can even chat with other players. This game is an MMORPG. And if that's the case, then it means that these people and his allies in this case, he will get to know them better. Maybe he should even take the initiative. The guy said that since fate brought them together, why don't they introduce themselves to each other? It's a good idea, the dark-haired guy said, and the blonde guy was as annoyed as ever. The friendly guy's name was Choi Min-sik. He is 47 years old and just an ordinary office worker. And he was also involved in athletics at school, so he is confident in his abilities. The blonde guy's name was Jo Kyung-min, and what are they doing here anyway? They need to be more coherent, the hero said, but does he look like a child? The hero introduced himself. He is Lee Ho-yi. He is 26 years old, and his hobby is completely connected with video games. Once he was a pro player. The blonde one was scared by the chance that he didn't play Magic Online. The guy likes strategy more. The blonde also loves this genre very much, even though he only played Magic Online. The hero also played it for a while, but after a global update, he decided to abandon it. The man was glad that the guys found a common language. The boys started talking and couldn't hear her, so she had to yell. She is Park Soo-ah. She likes to watch anime, and she can write more than 100 dissertations on various anime subjects. The guys turned around and looked surprised, but in that case, why don't they share the information they have? This game world is very suitable for a regular RPG. They were given starting weapons, and they can also check their status. Moreover, there are several of them here, so he is sure that this is a real MMORPG. The color of his hair, and he felt like he was on fire. He thought about it too, because groups are an important part of any such game. Co-opus playthroughs allow you to unlock the potential of each class and weapon, so why don't they show off their weapons and assign roles to the team? The man agreed and took out his trident. The blonde took out his own. These were all melee weapons, so the guy only hopes for the girl. He's counting on it. Whatever it is, a bow or a throwing weapon, it doesn't matter, as long as it's designed for ranged combat. The girl took out a sword. There is absolutely no balance in this group. The hero was afraid. All the guys chose melee weapons. How can the group be so unbalanced? Well, what does training mean? Why does it start only in 3 days? But the man, or what, does not know. Training is the stage in which they are taught about all the features of the game. They will have to wait 3 whole days, so I don't want to wait, the girl said. The guy was lost in thought, and the girl asked him why he was staring at her like that. He realized that there were still 3 full days before the training started, so why not assign roles and practice? Well, why do they need training? Because it's easy to pass training. Despite the fact that this is only from preparation, its complexity can vary greatly depending on the game. Sometimes you can die even at the very beginning of it. Moreover, they have one big weakness, but what is it? All weapons, the hero said, are designed for close combat. They will become easy targets if opponents start attacking from a long distance. The guys also realized this, but in any case, each weapon is unique in its own way. For example, its sword and shield are good for fighting on the front line. It can take a blow and at the same time hit back. The blonde guy with his axe can deal much more damage. He will be the main attacker of their team. He and the hero will stand on the front line. The guys can rely on him. As for the dark-haired man, among all their weapons, his trident has the largest attack range, so he should be covering their rear. The guy really is a gambler, but what about the girl? She asked when she was forgotten again. It's a free roll for miss, but what does that mean? She'll be a backstretch, for example. Her sword is almost the same length as the trident, so she can fill the same role as a man. The girl is confident in her abilities. She tried to attack with the ball, but that wasn't what the guy meant. It was that she'd be safer in the back. What does he mean? Do you think she should stay behind and watch because she's a woman? Maybe he wanted to be brave and show off. But in modern society, gender equality is valued above all else. His views on life are rather outdated, and she is more than confident that she can be useful. It's not even that the katana is just too long, and she is playing the heroine of some anime. The girl will not be able to swing such a huge thing with one hand. He doubts that the girl will be useful. And the man interrupted and said that he understood her feelings, but why shouldn't they follow Mr.'s advice? They don't know what's waiting for them in the training area, and they've all chosen a hell of a challenge. So let them listen to the hero and his opinion this time, because each of them is risking their own safety. He is really right in this case. You need to start training. We see how the girl started swinging her katana. She said that you need to flicker in the stream of light, eternal judge, and attack the man. The guys were watching and didn't understand what she was doing, but what was going on anyway? I asked the blonde guy to stop. Why is she shouting all sorts of nonsense before every attack? It confuses everyone present. She does this because to apply the technique, you need to shout out its name. There's nothing embarrassing about it, but that's not what he's talking about. The girl did not pay attention and continued to say her phrases. Is she even listening to him? The man also tried to stop her, and instead of using the word pierce in the phrase pierce my enemies with a moonlight strike, it would be more appropriate to say cut. After all, she is holding a katana in her hands. The girl will not calm down, but at least they have mastered the basics. The blonde guy was extremely confused at the time, but there are still two important points. In the waiting room, not only do they heal much faster, but all weapons also recover at an incredible speed. Broken weapons and equipment repair themselves. When the blonde broke the axe and then turned away in perfect condition, the guy was very surprised. Here, I also feel thirsty or sleepy, and since their wounds are healing quickly in the waiting room, they can afford more intensive training, the hero thought. Well, what happens if they die in this normal RPG game? He is resurrected at a save point, for example, in a village. If this game does not have a resurrection function, they will lose by death. The guys are tired and rested a little. It's time to change. Now it's the guys' turn to fight. The blonde is already impatient. They will find out which of them is more suitable for the role of leader. The guy wished the others a happy journey to hell, and the hero praised the girl for the work done. They will again arrange a massacre. In fact, it doesn't matter who is the winner. In games this happens quite often. Players try to find out who is stronger and decide on the means of battle. If Mr. becomes the leader, then the guy thinks their team will be more focused on defense. And if the guy wins, then the base will be the offense, which sounds pretty fun. The girl thought that the hero would become the leader, but I mean, he seems very mature for his age. Why does she think so? He doesn't seem to have changed much since his student days and pro player career. He said he went to Sohan University, so he must be very smart. His parents threatened that if he didn't score high on the final exam, they wouldn't let him become a pro player. And later, he quit his job pretty quickly anyway. But what's the reason? The hero did not answer anything, but looked at the struggling guys. The blonde was indignant that the uncle had such a long weapon. They should change. But this is completely absurd. The potential of weapons is revealed only in the hands of a true master. What bores they are. The hero watched them. It's a pity that they don't have popcorn with drinks now, the girl added. He laughed. There were 10 seconds left before the training session, so their time had come. The guy had never trained so hard in his life, and the man had never trained so hard in the same way. He only managed to get this far because everyone else was there. Thank you all. The girl looked with kind eyes. Now their time has come. Here it is, their first test. Soon there will be a portal leading to the first floor of training. Soon, each of them had their own portal. Is this really a single passage? They have trained so much. And these will be single battles? Everyone was outraged. But the hero denied that the time spent in training was not in vain. He is right, the players said. The portals will be activated soon. Soon this happened, and just before the teleport, the guy said that until today he had read that single-player playthrough is more effective, so he preferred solo play. But the last 3 days went really interesting for him. For the first time in his life, he really enjoyed the team game. They will see each other again. The guy before the teleport told everyone to take care of themselves, and they said goodbye. The guys have teleported. You need to enter the first floor. The remaining time is 24 hours. The table once again shows what the training levels and stages will be. A guy appeared in some corridor. Welcome to training. He looked around, and there, at the end of the corridor, was a certain weapon. A breeze flew by. He had open work goosebumps. He needed to calm down. The guy looked around. Why didn't the portal close yet? Inside, he had the choice to move to the waiting room on the first floor. It turns out that he can return at any time. This is quite convenient. The guy clicked on the yes button and found himself in the waiting room. As he thought, there is no one here, as if he had cleared everything in a minute. Clearly, he can come back here at any time. But what happens when the time report ends? The time that is meant for the training room. Self-healing is good. It still works. The guy cut his arm with a sword, but it healed quickly. In that case, even if he was on the verge of death, he would be able to survive just by returning here, which is great news. He walked away, turned around, and saw the girl falling on top of him. It turns out that she also teleported. They both got scared and fell to the ground. She didn't know that they could return, just like the guy himself. Self-healing still works. If she is injured, then she can come back here. Girl, everything will be great. Find out about it and the others, whether to wait for them here, you need to do so. The girl has 23 hours and 42 minutes left to enter the first floor. She does not think that the others will return. Let them just not say. The community, the number of people has not changed. So no one lost. Then maybe they should go while the time runs out, the girl said. He thinks so too. She has a request, but when they get back, let him teach her how to play video games. They'll do it together. She has one more request. She approached the guy's face, what she wants to do. The girl abruptly turned around and said that when they meet, she wants to get to know him better. It fit in the teleport, and the guy didn't understand what happened. He went to his room. Now check the status again. The portal has a time limit. He still doesn't know much about this place. The worry is that there are no health and mana columns. But as long as he avoids fatal injuries, he thinks it will be fine because he can go back to the waiting room. If that's the case, they'll start out as human in his status, which means that there are other races in this world, so he can easily identify them all. The breeze blew out. Whoever it was at the end of that corridor might come out and look like a hero, but what happened? 30 minutes had passed, but nothing was happening. Maybe he was doing something wrong. At the end of that time, he still hadn't managed to meet any opponents or anything to interact with. But do not lose your vigilance. Do not underestimate the hero. His attentiveness is about a player of a completely different level. Suddenly, his status flashed, his battle concentration and willpower appeared. He got new skills, didn't he? So these are two passive skills. In most games of this genre, skills are divided into two categories, active and passive. Active skills must be activated by the player himself, while passive skills are active from the moment they are acquired. If so, then now everything became clearer. Combat concentration, willpower. If certain conditions are met, he will be able to get the appropriate skills. Both of them are related to his current state. If he is not mistaken, then in order to gain new skills, he must fulfill various conditions. The more the better. Should he write to the community about it? He was walking along his corridor, but suddenly a strong wind blew. What is this atmosphere that comes from there? A black mass was flying around the sides. The guy was very focused. This mass crashed right into him while he was running. It hit him squarely in the leg, and the guy twisted and fell over in pain. What was it? What was wrong with his leg? He needed to get to the waiting room faster. What kind of arrow was this? It turns out that he was shot from a bow, but what was it? Arrows were flying from everywhere. His level of resistance to more increased by 1. This pain is quite real. What will happen if he dies here? This cannot be. He got the blood loss resilience skill. Now, is he really going to die like this in this hole? The arrow hit him in the back. It was very painful. He's finished. If this goes on, he's definitely dead. It would be better if he died and started all over again. Of course, you can start all over again. He can just die and start all over again. He remembered the guys in the room, but no, he couldn't do that. He remembered the girl. He couldn't give up. The guy got up with the last of his strength, pulled out the arrows that hit him. He can't die. He won't die. He can pass this game. He rushed to run towards the portal. With all his strength, the arrow cut his face, which was flying nearby. He literally flew into the portal and came back. He's finally saved. It feels like he's out of hell. This training is too hard, but what about the others? He opened a community, but what kind of nonsense was that? He saw that he was the only one left among the infernal level. It can't be that they all died. It's a joke. The guy was very scared and did not believe that his new friends had died. This could not have happened. He buried his head in the pillar. If you think about it, it's pretty obvious. The two of them didn't even know that they could go back to the waiting room. The girl, in turn, would not have had the stamina to survive several attacks. He remembered the names, how they could all die, burst into tears. He was near the column, but suddenly the status was updated. Pain resistance is up, consciousness loss resistance is up, blood loss resistance and awakening are all passive skills. He needed to get to the first floor, and he had 19 hours and 12 minutes left to do it. He understands this, at least he has to survive. He swears that he will pass the training. The guy teleported again, was already ready for battle. The first arrow could appear at any moment. The bloodstains disappeared. Apparently, the floor reloads every time he enters the waiting room, just like in the game. In this case, there must be a way to clear this level. You need to find out about the reboot. So the first arrow appeared, a shot. It flew right past the guy. It was aimed at his right leg. This is interesting. As the hero thought, the arrow's trajectory didn't change, so the attack pattern never changes. But where was the next one that flew straight into his shield? The second one was aimed at his chest, and so on. The third one flew to his head, but he was able to return everything to normal. He will be able to block it. The next arrow smashed his shield, and he was left defenseless. This is very bad. He screwed up again. You need to go back to the portal. We need to get back faster. We need to heal, the guy said, and with blood from his mouth he tried to reach the portal. He couldn't stand it and realized that he was dying. The level was raised. Agility, health and resistance to pain was increased. As he raised his level, the guy literally did not hurt anything. His shield has recovered and the arrow in his chest has also disappeared. The attacks have stopped. While there is still time to check your status. Now he's level 1, so he must have been level 0 before. But what does that mean? As soon as he upgraded, he and all his items recovered just like in the waiting room. If you think about it, this is quite a popular feature, which means that it can recover both in the waiting room and when you level up. Conditions for doing this include blocking, dodging, or getting hit by arrows. You need to gain experience in any of these ways, and each time you manage to survive by returning to the waiting room, the dungeon is reloaded. This means that he can pass through these traps and get as much experience from them as he wants. Getting mortally wounded and surviving by leveling up would never have occurred to him in his right mind, but his level has increased and he's definitely stronger. Isn't that a great tactic? Since he was going to give it his all, the scoreboard said that the god of adventure was interested in him, but what did that mean? After a while, he did. The pain resistance reached the 4th level. Damn it. If that's the case, why is he still in terrible pain? It's not over yet. He will be able to gain experience again and again by getting injured and treated. This is the most effective way to raise his level. After some time, at 1927, the guy ran straight at the arrows. It was a certain way of his shield and sword. He beat off these 2 arrows and ran further. On the scoreboard, the guy chose to sharpen his senses and sprint and ran to a certain room. There was a thing that shot arrows. He definitely saw it, but he ran on, dodging it. He ran and hit all the arrows. This is an excellent result. It's been 28 days since his first attempt. He managed to collect a lot of skills, and the fact that he was often on the verge of death allowed him to raise the level several times. Just what kind of god of adventure is this? Why is he suddenly interested in a hero? In any case, he didn't think he'd be able to run for 15 hours without stopping. He had something added to his inventory. It must have been due to the level up, but there was almost no time left. A few days ago, a small ad appeared in the community. Each stage is given only 30 days to complete, and it is not known what kind of punishment awaits those who do not meet the deadline. Regardless of the circumstances, he needs to clear out all the remaining 2 days. But the problem is that he has no idea what he is. He does not know the location of the new traps. Moreover, in the future they will differ from the previous ones. He doesn't know why, but his skills, night vision, and clear vision have stopped working, and he can only rely on his sword and shield, and of course, his own abilities. The guy started to run. When he ran, a few arrows immediately flew at him. He tried to dodge them, but still shrank. With the resistance to pain of the 8th level, this is not a problem for him. The guy continued to run. He was running and arrows kept coming at him. One hit him in the back, and it was very painful for the guy. He finally ran into a certain room. It was a calm place, bright, and in the middle was water surrounded by rocks. Hell of a challenge. The guy was lying in the water and wondering where he was. All his wounds were healed. It's a miracle that he came out at all. This is the same healing source. Isn't everything exactly as described by people in the general chat? He was helped by information from guys from other rooms. So, if everything was true, then this is the boss room. He looked at the red door. Great. He finally made it to the final. Does he want to test himself? Of course, but why did they think he came here? The door opened and a bright light dawned on him. But what was it? What was the boss's room? In the distance there was a device that threw arrows. One immediately almost hit him, but he crouched down. It will be much more difficult here. He must destroy this thing. Her arrows did not run out of time. You need to move to the other side. This is the essence of the test, because the floor was not simple, and stones floated in the fiery lava. Well, they thought that he would give up so easily. The guy started to run. An arrow flew from the ceiling. He survived only thanks to his heightened senses. The hero said, with his current skills, it's possible. And at some point, his clothes caught fire, and the whole body was covered with fire. It was terribly painful. The guy did not know what to do and how to put it out. It was simply impossible. He was looking at the throwing machine. It was impossible. Why? From the beginning. He remembered the boys, all of them. He was used to spending all his time playing video games, not because he was bored, but because he enjoyed it. It became his only hobby, but now he understands that his skills in games were his asset. In the end, he had all lost his honor to his existence. Since then, everything in this world has seemed incredibly boring. But now it's different, it hurts, it's unbearable, but he doesn't hate it. With each new notification, his heart starts pounding wildly. In the past, he gave up everything, realized that he could not become the best, but he will never repeat this mistake. The guy, even with a burning t-shirt, got up, took it off and continued to run. This training is too hard, but the guy made his way over the rocks and jumped further. He threw himself directly at the bow. The arrows continued to fly, but the guy was breaking them now. He would never give up. It was over. The guy finally broke this throwing thing and realized that he could win. He did it. He passed the first floor of training on hell difficulty. What a pity that now the guys are not around. He raised his fist for everyone. The first floor was passed. Next, we see a certain girl with rabbit ears standing in a field in a very bright place. The guy continued to look at the table, which rewards he received, which gods paid attention to him, the rewards for cleaning up, which is a pity that his level did not increase. The blessing of the wind spirit, it just boosted his stats, quite a useful bonus. It was written in the portal that he should continue his training. The portal, does it lead to the second floor or to the waiting room? But the hero, there's nothing to be afraid of. He's fully recovered and he has no choice but to move on. The guy found himself in the same place as the girl with the rabbit ears in the beginning, gave up whether there were mountains, and here a green glade. This is hardly the waiting room. He is on the second floor. Darian saw that girl. Was it a human? Did the hero or player think it was a rabbit? The girl put her hands to her head and said that her name was Kirakiri. She was glad to meet them. At first, the guy was afraid. Maybe she was an enemy or maybe an NPC. She asked what his name was. The guy introduced himself. She sang his name. He didn't understand what was going on. The girl said that she was ready for his services. She is the manager of this hellish complexity. What other manager did he not know that such things exist? There is one manager at each level. He can call her every time he passes a floor. By the way, she congratulates him. Now as a reward, he can use the shops and auction. Only an auction is available in the waiting rooms and live areas. But right now he can use the store whether he wants to try it, of course. Books, beds, toys, they sell everything they need. Don't they? If he needs anything, he needs it now. He needs weapons, shields, and clothing to start with, which he thinks will be more useful. The girl suddenly grabbed him by the shoulder and thereby frightened the hero, although she only wanted to help. The equipment he chose doesn't suit him. Isn't she being too direct? After a while, the guy was already in new clothes. Finally she feels alive. Well, why does the rabbit girl look like that? Maybe there's something wrong with his clothes. He has a question. What happens if you don't clear the first floor within 30 days? Then he will be returned to the waiting room. All food will disappear from the inventory, and he will have to spend points on purchases in the store. They may not feel hungry in that room, but at the end of 24 hours, he will be banished from it. And what will happen when he is kicked out? The girl sharply shouted that it is impossible. Her task is to consult the players who managed to get here, but even the answers are limited. Those who show all their potential, those who have achieved excellent results, and those who only like such people, she can tell everything. But after all, she had told him about shopping at the store. There are no restrictions for easy advice. These questions are quite simple. She had more important things in mind. Now she can only talk about one thing, no more, so no questions. Because there are things that he needs to know. You need to buy potions with status effects. The more he buys them, the better it will be, since the theme of the second floor will be status effects and everything related to them. He still has one more question that he would like to ask, but it is impossible to ask more about what will happen to those who died here. The girl did not answer anything. He understood everything. He thanked her for giving him some advice, and now it was time for him to go. The guy teleported away. She said goodbye to him, and don't let him die. You're quite an interesting girl. They'll see each other again. He was in the waiting room on the second floor, hoping that this room had all the functions that the previous one had. Did he want to enter the floor? These were the second level trials, so does that mean he can start before the first one is over? If the hero clears 2 or more tests in one period, then he will receive the corresponding rewards. Is it worth trying? Still, you need to be careful. The hero cannot die. He will ask Kirakiri after clearing the second floor. In the waiting room, he noticed a bed and was very surprised. This is a good bonus. It's already so comfortable. He will take a little nap, just a little bit. Suddenly he woke up with a fright. How much the hero slept? About 12 hours. But he had never slept so much at once in his life. He had changed a lot since he was here. The feeling that a very long time has passed, how the young man's life would have turned out if he hadn't pressed the consent button. After spending a lot of time here, it was as if he had returned to the days of the pro player's career, when the hero trained without sparing himself to win one of the matches, and he was ready to put everything on the line to defeat his opponent. Now he feels like he's back in the game, and more than that, in a game where he really puts absolutely everything on the line. He didn't have time to think about his status. He got an active skill. An active skill, this skill is applied by the player manually. It was originally a passive skill, but it changed after clearing the first floor, and it doesn't even require mana to use it. So, the hero can use the skill as long as his mind is able to withstand it. It is worth trying. The skill of combat concentration. He ran around the room and analyzed. With his mental strength, about 5 minutes he was able to withstand. Even his vision went dark there. If he overdid it, he might lose consciousness altogether. The consumption of mental powers was more significant than he thought. He hopes that he will be able to strengthen the mind, raising the level, perhaps continue to use it. Well, what about the auction attraction? This feature is for those who have cleared the first floor. Players can sell and buy things from each other regardless of the chosen difficulty level. Most of them are starter kits and unusable weapons, probably because they've only completed one floor. It is impossible that someone received something like this. The hero would not even accept it as a gift. He believes that the blessing of the wind spirit can be considered a good reward. He is lucky. With 71 hours and 59 minutes left until the end of training, the hero believes that he will have to spend 3 days here, just like during the first test. Waiting time and passing time, for a total of 33 days for each challenge. During this waiting time, you should work on improving the resistance to status effects. It will take a look at what people write in the community chats. He opened a community and there were 6 people in his hell difficulty group. How did the number of people increase? How could it have increased? It looks like the other players noticed it too. There are 5 new players in the hell level. They must be at a loss right now and have no idea what's going on here. If he leaves everything like this, then everyone will die. We need to somehow share information with them. But there were already 4 out of 6 people in the chat. They were logged into their chat. He wrote to them to respond to those who are in the chat. He needs to share important information with them. But people came out again. Why did they do this? If so, then he will put up an ad. Let them read it. You cannot underestimate the training. Later, the guy took a sword and wanted to stab himself. He did so, but nothing works. His stability does not increase. Maybe he cannot get experience while in the waiting room. Anyway, they don't trust him at all. What's the point of helping people if they're not even interested in it? What are they guys going to do now? The test is about to start, and he helped as much as he could, and now, meet him on the 2nd floor. The guy teleported and was already standing in the rack, and so, what is waiting for him this time? The location is no different from the first floor, but in games this is quite common, in which case he did not have time to finish, as the arrows immediately flew at him. It was too predictable. The guy stepped on the attack, but what was that noise? Suddenly something flew right into his shield and broke it into pieces. It was very fast. Could it be a poison needle? It flew straight into his leg and the guy fell unconscious. The pain in my head and stomach, plus the chills, was definitely poison. Thank you so much, Kirikiri. The guy took out the antidote, but wait, should I use it? He bent down to the foot. During that hellish month of passing the first floor, he finally got one unusual ability, and that was the feeling of approaching death. This is not an in-game skill, but a special ability that only he has. His intuition tells him how dangerous the wounds are and whether he can die from them. Every time he was close to death, it was a skill that saved him. He felt as if he had already swum across the floor of the river Styx and was even able to communicate with his grandmother, so you can accurately determine whether he is about to die or not. No matter how bad it was, this time it was great. He was still on the beach, so there was no danger yet, so he thought he should save the antidote for later. He tied a rope around his leg and gained resistance to poisons. Now he can tolerate poisoning more easily and will be able to walk more. The skill came in handy, but what about the poison needles on the floor? He would take them with him. They would still be useful. What happened? The guy seemed to fall to the floor. Is it possible that the effect of poisoning suddenly increased due to the fact that I spread through the body? You can return to the portal. The guy was walking towards the portal, wondering whether to increase his stability while he was still on his feet or not. He was half in the water and almost with his head now or never. He jumped into the portal. The guy found himself in the waiting room. He got resistance to paralysis, so his body could be paralyzed, something even more dangerous than other effects. Since he had already acquired the resilience skills and would now be able to gain more experience, he would try to upgrade them to level 3 today. He will have to be aware of his body in order to level up. Getting injured in dungeons and recovering in waiting rooms is the only way out. He is aware of this, but it is too Usually the level increases after defeating a strong monster. Not only is the difficulty of the floors high, but the tests are also boring. What a terrible game. Arrows flew straight into his shield. The guy ran on. He snatched these needles out of his hands and so on. That's the effect of poisoning. The theme of the 2nd floor is poisons. He will be cured at the moment when he is already on the verge of death, thereby increasing the level. That's the only way to promote effectively, This game is pretty damn out of character. The guy continued to fight and was already literally exhausted. Some stones were flying around him. The attack pattern is repeated, but the poison has become more deadly. If the hero loses consciousness, then he is finished. It is simply impossible to raise stability in this way. He also has this. He showed the potion. The guy beat off the arrows with his sword. You need to go to the second floor. It will be easy. In the next room, where there was a complete ruin, it was quite calm. But what is it? Just don't say what it is. The guy took out a sword. He was sure that the temperature, it gradually increases in this room. There was water in his hands. But why is it so hot here? He broke the bottle and poured it on himself. Now it was clear why the traps on the second floor were so simple, because something interesting was waiting for him. He really will have to dodge. Shooting in this brazier, isn't it a hike? Even this happens. But what should I do now? Should I go back and restore my strength? No, it's too far from the portal. It will be dangerous to return. At this temperature, it's worth continuing. He used a freezing potion. Now that he doesn't feel this heat, he can't keep fighting. It's improved the situation a bit. Well, it's back on again. The potion isn't working. At this rate, he's going to burn alive. He drank the stamina potion. He didn't want to waste a potion worth 400 points. Even leather armor is cheaper, but he had to. He's got a burn resistance skill, and it looks like the temperature is already burning his skin. When the guy started running away, an arrow hit him in the back. He weakened his defense. If they send him now, he's definitely a dead man. The guy was drenched in sweat and falling to the ground unconscious. Was this really the end of him? His level was raised, and suddenly he woke up full of energy. This is a new level. He rose. The hero increased his level. All health was restored and negative effects were removed. At this speed, he could easily walk the entire floor as if he was running at the speed of light. Activate battle concentration. He said to his skills, activate wind spirit blessing. The guy started running with frenzied strength. He will do it. He will be able to pass the second floor. He kept running and running, but suddenly he crashed into a wall. It was really painful when you think about it. He has to spend his last recovery potion on this. But he can't afford to die from getting tangled up in his legs. How humiliating that is. The god of adventure felt sorry for the guys. Why does he feel sorry for him? Did he see the hero fall, and what is this new skill? Natural regeneration increases the recovery rate of his body from various injuries. So, increasing the regeneration rate is a good thing. Today he became a little closer to becoming a troll. The guy was sitting next to the wall that the cold had hit. There must be an ice zone there, so he should go back to the waiting room and prepare better. He did. Trial 2, day 19, 6:30 in the morning. In some aspects, this world is no different from the real one, the guy thought as he ate a bun while sitting in the waiting room. There are both bad and good people in the chat, and if you look at the ratio, there are much more evil guys than good ones. And players should not so easily believe the words of those people who spread false information, because they are risking their lives. But what is it? If you clear 100 floors, you can return to the real world, wrote one of the players. It doesn't matter if they believe him or not, but it will give the players hope. But no one has discussed the conditions for completing the training before, in any case. He says that there are 100 floors here. Just thinking about it makes you shudder. The hero thinks that he will be able to find out the truth of these words by moving through the floors. Right now, he needs to clear the second one, so he did. The guy dressed warmly, took a gun and went to the ice room. Since the start of the second trial, he couldn't buy any items that would help him pass, so he had no choice but to buy a cloth and sewing kit from the auction, and at least protect himself from the cold a little. Everything he was wearing was handmade here. He would freeze to death here. As a result, he learned 2 new skills: extended field of vision and hard skin. As he made his way through this icy corridor, his field of vision increased and his skin became tougher. These skills are damn useful. At this rate, the hero will become a superhuman, but recently the resilience skills have not improved, so this was their limit. The further he went, the colder it got. The temperature here is about minus 50 degrees Celsius. It feels like his lungs are about to burst with every breath. Now that he had used his battle concentration, it was time to start. The guy dodged the attacks. He was already pretty fed up with this second floor. Everything is the same. He continued to run and finally entered the room with water. The same lake as the last time he drank this water. He finally came to the boss room. The doors were closed. He took off his clothes, and when they opened, there was a huge room with a dome inside. It's just incredible. Tableau asked if he wanted to go back to the second floor room. But what was going on? Go back? Why go back to the waiting room? What's going on here anyway, and why is this being offered to him? It turns out that the conditions for passing this room were such to be in it for at least 3 hours. The test will begin in 30 seconds. He will pass the test if he stays here for a certain amount of time, which is so easy if you think about it. The traps that he came across earlier, and this place should just be teeming with status effects. The hero is still haunted by this portal, but he was able to save a lot of items, so there is no point in returning. He will do it. He refused to go back to the waiting room and started fighting. He has to endure the most terrible pain he's ever experienced. But what does that mean? Suddenly, the room became dark and he felt as if he was being blown away by some wind with pain, as well as arrows flying all over his body. He was lying on the ground and in pain. Where did those arrows come from? He didn't feel the approach, and this pain, resistance to pain didn't help. Well, wait, isn't this his starting equipment? Now he understood. It's all illusions. It's a smell. If he was told that everything is for real, he would believe it. He needed to hold on to these illusions for 3 hours, he said. Suddenly the air lifted him up, and there were a lot of tables and some people below. But what was it? This was our hero earlier. He told some girl that she is the person he loves most in the world, and she is his destiny, offering to date. But the girl was very embarrassed and said that she didn't want to. It was the most shameful moment in his life. But those someones might just make him feel physical pain, rather than make him look at it all. The god of adventure pitied him. He can't even see how much time has passed since then. How much longer will he have to endure this? Yes, he found himself in a different place from where he was sitting at the computer earlier, some man in the screen admitting that Lee Ho-yi was indeed a great opponent. His pro career is amazing and his skills are top-notch. How did they even find that? The man said that this was all before his debut at this tournament. He will show the fruits of all his training and take the main prize. Here's a small fool angry our hero, sitting at the computer. He's had enough. Then there was the next moment, where the hero suffered a crushing defeat at this tournament. The guy was very disappointed. The former #1 player was damaged in all the rounds. Is this the birth of a new legend? Other people praised the winner. The guy was sitting at his computer and almost crying. Maybe it's time to quit this case. The winner came up to him. All this time, he was shown moments from the past that didn't make him happy. But how can he quit this case? Then he would tell the guy to. When he woke up in this room again, he was in tears. Them all, when this is over, he can't stand these illusions. It hasn't even been an hour since the illusion started, even though he doesn't die from it, but it's a real hell for him. At this point, our protagonist is holding onto his heart, simultaneously touching his chest with already bloody fingers. This time, he knew he was seeing memories of his father again. When will it even end? Of course, he came to because of the pain, so it's really nice to be able to dispel the illusions by injuring himself. He knew that he just had to accept all these memories, because only because of him did his father die. At this point, the illusion began again, and our protagonist's father appeared in front of him in a rake. He met Yi and told him that he was finally here, but how was he feeling anyway? My father contacted Ho and said that he probably should stop, saying that he should find a normal job, because is he really going to spend all his life playing computer games? Our character asked us not to start this conversation, but my father again started saying that he probably should have had enough of playing, because Tom still needs to build his future. Our hero started shouting, saying that he will earn money on games, that it is very difficult to fight for the title of the best. The father began to breathe heavily, clutching his heart, asking his son to wait, but Ho said that it would be better if he didn't even try to stop him. My father was already out of breath, but our character just turned around and said that he was leaving. Once again, our protagonist woke up. He realized that he could not do anything else, because he was being visited by another memory, a memory of his father's burial. He remembered his sister, who also heard that our character yelled at his father in the hospital, even though he knew that his heart was weak. He'd been told that he was the reason he'd died. All these words put our Ho in a trance. He understood that it was all because of him, because he didn't even try to understand his father. Because it is because of this that he is now being dragged deeper and deeper into the abyss of memories, but he still won't give up. He immediately cut his hand with his sword. The memories came back, so I had to stab myself again. Our main character understood that he could easily endure all the pain, because even if he plunged into the very depths of his thoughts, he would still rise higher. Everyone will still look at him, because he will get to the end. But just when our protagonist was about to continue, the tower told him that the test was passed. He was the first to pass it at half price. But what does that even mean? It was at this moment that many gods sharpened their gaze on Huo. But why is it like this? Our character didn't bother with these thoughts, so he decided to distract himself. But it was at this moment that we were also told that the goddess of slowness wanted to give her powers instead of additional rewards. Will our hero agree? Will he accept this offer, which was putting him in a stupor? But what does this even mean? Do these abilities differ from the usual ones? Of course, he did not expect this, but he knew that we were ready to accept this offer. It was at this moment, as soon as our protagonist's finger touched the notification, he was visited by a notification that the flicker emblem skill was obtained. His level was at its maximum. Our Ho did not understand what the description of this subject meant, and why it was written about any potential apostle at all. By then, the god of adventure had also said that he was disappointed in him, but why was that? What's gotten into that weirdo anyway? After all, if this happened, then it will definitely be worth finding out from Kirikiri. Mountains, the portal opens. It was from it that our character came out, who was again where he wanted to be. Immediately, a Kirikiri suddenly jumped out on his neck, which crashed into the nose of our main character. She laughed and then said that she was very happy to see our Ho after such a long time. She did not let our main character out of her arms, saying that she really missed him, which made our hero blush. She was glad that he came back alive, but at the same moment our protagonist said to wait, because at that moment he clicked on buy and bought a cake, which Kirikiri definitely would not refuse. She couldn't understand why he was even giving her such a gift, but Ho just said that she had helped him a lot. All her advice had helped him a lot before the second test. By that time, Kirikiri couldn't hear anything. Her mouth was full of drool. She already wanted to eat this cake as soon as possible. As soon as she cut herself a piece, they both sat down in the clearing and our main protagonist asked her if there were any tips for the third floor at all. Kirikiri immediately continued eating the cake and said that there was no advice. Of course, this put our hero in a stupor because she kind of told him tips for the second floor, so there should definitely be something for the third floor. But Kirikiri just put on a calm face and started saying that she really couldn't help because the person in front of her was too quickly lost. Even if she told me everything, it wouldn't be of any use. Our Priosage was surprised, but still took note of it and then asked what happened to those who joined during the second test. Are they still alive? But at the same time, Kirikiri interrupted him and started telling him that this question would use up his entire limit by asking, does he even want to ask it? Immediately, Ho wondered if that meant that if he got an answer to this question, he wouldn't get another one. Kirikiri replied that it was all true, so our main character decided to ask her something else. He decided to ask about the skills of the flicker emblem. But at the same time, he noticed that Kirikiri was no longer in her place, chasing butterflies in the field, clearly trying not to answer this question. Of course, our character made her answer, so Kirikiri, realizing that there was nothing she could do about it, said that she would help such a helpless person. She said that the flicker emblem is one of the skills of the goddess of slowness. Players who show outstanding results on floors can receive rewards from the gods. Our man asked if this meant that God liked him, but Kirikiri only replied that this was most likely the case, since every god can only grant his powers once. Our protagonist thought it sounded pretty good, because the goddess of slowness spent her only opportunity on him, and he definitely likes that. Then he got up and decided to ask Kirikiri about the effects of this skill, because the more detailed the better. But Kirikiri only said that he would be able to take a look at them when he returned to the waiting room, and he would figure it out later. Of course, at this moment, our main character was also struck by the fact that in front of him was a girl who was the manager of floors of hellish complexity, although at first glance she definitely did not look strong. He knew that during the first test, there was a player who tried to attack the manager, but in the end, he was easily crushed and was on the verge of death, so Kirikiri must be incredibly strong. As soon as he turned to look at her, he saw that she was holding a butterfly on her nose, which certainly didn't let him know that she was so formidable and strong. At that moment, he turned back to her and asked her what the gods were, what was their purpose, and what did they want from them. But Kirikiri just turned around and said that her man should figure it out for himself. Of course, her face was so serious that it let Ho know that this was probably a very serious or forbidden topic, that he probably hit the main point of the game. Of course, he assumed that it was the gods who created this world and then called the players into it, and since Kirikiri is part of the game, he just can't answer that question. 2 floors out of 100 have already been completed, so the third and even the fourth floor are waiting for him. Our protagonist believed that he could reach the top and find all the answers to his questions about his new world. He just had to do it. By the time he was walking to his portal, he decided to ask Kirikiri one more question. He said that when he passed the second floor, it was written that he was the first to fully clear the last gate, so what does that mean? But Kirikiri at this point, she said it was a bug in the system. Our character decided to find out about this, because what does the word error in the system mean in general? Kirikiri said she couldn't tell. This was followed by a question about managers, whether he would be able to return to his world after 100 floors, or about Kirikiri's ears. But to each of these responses, Kirikiri replied that she couldn't say or just didn't know. Kirikiri just didn't say anything, which was very annoying for our main character. However, as soon as he was about to enter the portal, Kirikiri gave him a certain robe. Our protagonist just couldn't believe it, because really he can take it. But Kirikiri laughed again and said that the taste in human clothing is so terrible that even this cape will be better. Our main character laughed and said that then he would go, but she could keep the cake for herself. Kirikiri was very happy, so our character, just before leaving for the portal, said that next time he would definitely buy another one. Both characters said their goodbyes, so in just a few seconds, our protagonist found himself on the 3rd floor in a waiting room. He knew that he should take a look at his skills before starting. He used the status spell, and then a message appeared in front of him saying that he could read his skills. The first thing he did, of course, was to see what the new skill that the goddess of slowness had given him could do. They said that the goddess of slowness really hates rushing somewhere, so just by blinking one eye, you can jump a long distance 5 times. After all the jumps are used, the cooldown will be exactly 5 minutes. This skill was a movement skill. But our hero could not expect anything else from the goddess of slowness. Of course, it was quite convenient to use it, so at the same time, he decided to use it. Our protagonist's eye lit up and the skill was used. A second later, he was already at a different distance, as if he had teleported. But is it really that convenient to use the power of the gods? This was the real power of the goddess. If other players found out about this ability, they would definitely decide to ask the developers to weaken such a powerful skill. So if this is how things have already gone, then it would be worth using as many as 5 jumps in a row. But since this room was very fast, then it was very difficult to control it. Our Ho just crashed his nose into one of the columns. He knew that this feeling was similar to just hitting and falling on his bed. The time until the next test was already 72 hours. At that moment, our character decided to spend all his time buying potions, food, water, and it would be nice to buy weapons in general. He knew that if he took a new sword and protective suit, he would have enough. By that time, he decided to test his skills again and noticed that he had received the blessing of the wind spirit. Did the Kirikiri really do their best? It said that when a certain speed was reached, an acceleration effect could be obtained. This item could be used as the main one. So while there is still time, you would need to figure out exactly how to use the flicker logo control. He immediately got to his feet and noticed that he had received a message from Hell Difficulty players. But as soon as he opened this letter, he saw an invitation to the representative guild. It said that the only reason this email was sent was because Lee Chan-seok was amazed by Ho's achievements on the hellish difficulty levels. We were looking forward to hearing from our protagonist. Of course, our character understood that the community chat was quite lively lately, but he did not think that such groups were formed so quickly, and even earlier he did not notice this name in the list of best players. In the end, the only player who successfully defended the floors of hellish difficulty in this tower was our main character. There was no way for him to get involved with other people, so this offer could definitely be postponed for later. He only had to prepare to go to the 3rd floor and prepare to travel a hell of a long way to reach the 100th floor. 3rd floor of training. Our protagonist was a knight who fought on a chessboard. He successfully dodged the attacks, because he realized that traps were activated only when the black plates were pressed, which means that the white plates are safe. However, as soon as he stepped on the white slab, a shiver went through his body. He thought he was right about the white tiles, but there's definitely something strange going on. It was at this moment that he activated his skill list and moved a huge distance in 1 second. He really liked to pass, it was unusual fun for him. But as soon as our host stepped on the Buliu slab, the snow immediately began to fly at him. The flicker skill was activated, but our protagonist was scared. He knew that he was simply being made to think that the white slabs were safe, and that a hail of arrows was being aimed at him at the last step. It really pissed him off, but in any case, he was already able to reach the boss room. It is possible that due to the complexity of the previous floors, everything there seems very simple, which already disappointed him. Our protagonist was standing in front of the door and touching it. Given that he hadn't received any new skills, it didn't seem like he should go back to the waiting room, so he decided to open the door in front of him and close it as quickly as possible. The door was open so that some rocks appeared in front of our main protagonist's eyes. What was waiting for him in such a place this time? Sure enough, this was the 3rd floor, the boss room. The essence of the challenge was to reach the end, and the difficulty was that the plates are floating in the air, which after a while fall down. They would need to be used as a support to achieve the goal. At this moment, like a real frog in nature, our hero began to jump on them. He thought it was an insane challenge, a hell of a challenge that definitely deserves its name. With an incredible effort, he began to move on those very slabs and began to understand that the slabs simply fall after a while. The pitfalls of the past were simple, but now things are much more complicated. After all, in addition to the fact that he takes care not to fall, so many arrows are also flying at him. At this point, our character began to fall somewhere. He noticed that there were no tiles behind him, so it was about time to use his newfound skill. By that time, he was looking and realized that the slabs on the 3rd floor, one way or another, would still fall. It was the players who forgot about this and focused on the traps badly. Even after being attacked, they had to avoid the trap skill and reach the target. The invariable condition for passing the boss room is that you can't just pass through the tiles. However, if you increased your skills on the 1st and 2nd floors, as well as obtained an ability from the gods, then everything became possible. By the time our main character focused on the passage, he noticed that all the tiles had fallen, but he definitely could not despair, because he had the flicker emblem, with which he would definitely be able to change the invariable condition and gain a foothold on the tiles. It was at this point that he was able to latch onto the last slab and was able to pass the 3rd floor of training on hell difficulty. Even though he didn't die this time, the boss room was really dangerous. The creators of this floor definitely surpassed even themselves. Did they even hope to kill all the players here? After all, even if Ho managed to pass it with difficulty, what can we say about the others? After each pass, of course, his favorite points came, but this time he managed to find something better. He noticed that the god of adventure wants to grant Ho some of his powers instead of an additional reward. Of course, this surprised our hero, because he has already started to get on his nerves every day, but why does he even want to give strength right now? Of course, the twinkle emblem was a cheat skill that exceeded his expectations. He wouldn't even be able to pass this floor, but still, the gift couldn't be refused. So the offer was accepted, and the skill was called Wings of Teleria. What does this name even mean? As soon as our protagonist came to his senses, he decided to read that this particular skill was created randomly, so it aroused great interest among players. Is this really such a useless skill? At this moment, Lee Ho immediately got angry with his stats and noticed that this skill was at its maximum level, so even so, it would be useful to him. He was very surprised, so he wanted to ask Kirakiri, who was waiting not only for her man, but also for the cake. She immediately got into a hug, so that our character even had to push her away with his foot. He knew that a promise was a promise, so he would have to buy the cake. Kirakiri had already noticed something strange about our hero's performance, so she asked if he was okay. Ho said that he was dizzy and immediately fell to the floor. As soon as his eyes opened again, he didn't know where he was, but after remembering everything, he realized that he was just tired. He even noticed that Kirakiri was lying on top of him, using him like a pillow. He immediately started touching her ears, which very quickly dissuaded and embarrassed Kirakiri. She immediately began to say that they should not be touched, because these sounds are very sharply distributed in her head. The cake was bought and placed on the table. Our protagonist immediately decided to ask her about the last level of the 3rd floor. He thought it was very strange that the difficulty increased so much, he even thought that he would die soon. But Kirakiri only said that if he was talking about it, it was very strange. Our character said that he didn't understand, so Kirakiri replied that the boss room on the 3rd floor had a path below that needed to be followed. Our Ho just couldn't believe it, so Kirakiri continued by saying that most likely no one even expected the player to be able to walk through the room without falling. Most likely all the gods are going crazy. Our main character immediately thought that he knew exactly about the gods who tormented him so much, and then decided to continue reading the community chat again while Kirakiri ate her cake. Of course, he didn't see any information in the soup that could help him, because most of it was about simple and medium difficulties, but then he noticed that many people started talking about the representative guild. They said that everyone in this guild was sitting in the waiting room, so they probably had something very wrong in mind. Many people have received an invitation to join it, but then why are they sitting in the waiting room? Are they the ones who sent the invitation to our main protagonist back then? Sure enough, Hyo thought that they weren't like a normal guild with other players, so who were they? After all, after the end of the level, all free water and food disappear, so players simply do not need to spend points on buying food, and after 24 hours in the waiting room, you will simply be kicked out. Why are they still there for so long? Our character's eyes were fixed on that very invitation, so he thought to ask Kirakiri about it, but then he thought better of it, because he knew that he shouldn't waste his limited questions on it at all, because he wouldn't be able to help other players on other difficulties anyway. I definitely needed to focus on my problems. At the same time, he asked Kirakiri what he would need on the 4th floor. Kirakiri said that the 4th floor would require a rope, hooks, and a telescope. That's probably all. Of course, this list was a little big and strange, but still sane, so our main character asked about the Wings of Teleria. Kirakiri was surprised, because did the person get one skill again? Already got 2 whole god skills. It was at this moment that the power of Teleria's wings was revealed. Their power lay in the fact that they allow you to float in the air, and also give incredible protection to magic. At this point, our main character was already able to activate this skill. He thought that this skill was just fine. Kirakiri replied that this skill doesn't allow you to fly, but it does allow you to hover. Our main protagonist immediately said that he knew, because the main thing was that how he would use them. He said that he would be able to fly up using the flicker emblem, thus increasing the hover range. And the coolest thing is that these are wings behind your back, so having them is every guy's dream. At that moment, Kirakiri agreed with everything. She looked at the man and said that she was going to thank him for buying the cake. The portal was open, which surprised Ho very much. He couldn't understand what was going on, but Kirakiri said that the day of the great gathering would soon be here, so that's when our main character will be able to understand the true nature of their world. He must do whatever it takes to survive. Kirakiri pushed him further, and our main character asked her to wait. But that was when he found himself in the waiting room. By that time, you could already see a lot of people who were dressed as usual, and on one of the pillars hung a man. He asked for forgiveness, but no one listened to him. A dagger was thrown at him. The dagger was thrown by Lee Chang-suk, the head of the representative guild. By then, our main protagonist, in order to prepare for the fourth floor, had focused on training using the power of the gods, specifically the wings and the twinkle emblem. He trained for a very long time until he was able to use the skills comfortably and freely. Right at this moment, he already knew that it was about time to enter the fourth floor. It was necessary to find out what was really going on there. By that time, he was in a certain dungeon or subway. What was coming at him anyway? Was something approaching, or were they just traps? But immediately, monsters appeared in the darkness. This monster was so wild and hefty that just the sight of it was terrifying. The huge ogre immediately struck the ground, which made it clear exactly the difference in strength between Ho and him. But how was it even necessary to fight? After all, I did not advise him to change weapons. Which means it's only something he can defeat with his current one. It is at this point that you should activate your combat concentration and defeat the monster in front of you. The ogre tried to strike again, but our main character was immediately able to easily dodge and then tried to strike. The ogre noticed this, so it decided to counterattack its opponent in the side. Our character immediately flew away. The ogre now even made it clear that he wasn't as slow as he might have thought at the beginning. The ogre immediately decided to attack again. Our protagonist decided to block the blow, but the ogre's blow turned out to be just a feint, which immediately smashed the shield to smithereens. The ogre once again began to attack the defenseless protagonist, but for some reason I got hit in the face. The ogre was shocked, but the emblem played a role. Of course, until then, our Ho used this skill to dodge, but now he activated this skill before his attack. Moving forward, he was able to hit his opponent in the face. It seems that this skill could definitely be used in battles much better than expected. It was time to finish, so the Wind Spirit Blessing was activated. The ogre only noticed the wounds that appeared on his body. The last thing he saw was his head falling off his shoulders. Our Ho was very happy with himself and his result, so he started to destroy all the monsters in his path. By that time, 26 ogres were already ready, so he even decided to fight his next opponent with his bare hands. He realized that his skills had improved, but the basic swordsmanship skill combined with the slashing skill and increased to the 3rd level. It was all thanks to the goblins, but the trials were already coming to an end. It was already the 30th day on time, and the number 2 trial was about to end. Of course, after 2 minutes, the 3rd test came, so it was only necessary to check the newcomers. This time, no one chose the hellish difficulty again. However, chaos broke out in the community chat, so our Ho knew that all they had to do was calm down. He immediately wrote to the chat and said that they should all just calm down and listen to him. He said it was all learning that was different from the world they lived in. They won't be able to go back to the nearest place, so if they make just one mistake here, they might die. He asked them to listen to him. Many people were already very afraid, thinking that they were going to hell or something like that. Of course, many people talked about some kind of monsters, some did not understand anything at all. This was said by some other player on a different difficulty level, which was never seen in the community. It was at this moment that they all finally realized that their home, their world, had become a living hell. At this moment, in the very world where they all lived, the monsters started to come out of the portals in the middle of the street and move towards the residential areas. Many people watched it on the news. Everyone knew that there was nothing anyone could do. Countries whose strength was very small were destroyed, and 2 weeks after the appearance of the monsters, the number of people dropped to 90 million. Our protagonist just couldn't believe it, and the entire chat didn't want to believe it either. But then Ho remembered about his sister and mother, but then he realized that there were so many messages in the chat that he couldn't find out what was true and what was false. What does it even mean that monsters have appeared on Earth? How do I get useful information at all? It was at this point that one of the people in the chat asked if they could be spatty at all. Of course, our main protagonist was thinking that since he can deal with all the monsters so easily, then when he passes the 100th floor, he will definitely become stronger than usual. All he felt was that he was now trapped in a new world for no apparent reason. Without explaining anything, in other words, the AI moved them there so that they could save the world. In the real world, more than a month had passed since the appearance of portals, so today was day 0, test 3 and train. He finally understood the essence of this world called training. We can understand that it was on the day when the newcomers told everyone about what was happening in their real world that everything seemed to change first. The number of players actively passing through the floors increased, and those players whose families were in the real world had a huge determination. Even if they didn't go on a raid, there were those who provided support to other players. Our character was one of them. By then, he was giving an incredible amount of advice to all the players. He gave them advice about what he could find out for himself. As soon as the monsters approached him, he would attack them without the slightest fear or regret. He was no longer so weak and powerless. The monsters only saw the determination in his eyes and then the blade near their body parts. Our Ho dealt with them in a split second, but when he dealt with them, he rested. He slept a negligible amount of time, about 2 hours, but he hoped that this particular amount of time would be enough to keep his mental state in a normal state. All he had to do was make sure that he still had time for this dream. By that time, he finally opened the community tab and noticed that the information that was there had increased several times. Everyone was making as much effort as possible to pass these floors. With the increase in this flow of information, he gradually began to learn. For example, our main character realized that the strength indicator increases not only the strength of the arms and legs, but also increases the efficiency of all the muscles of the body. It is better to upgrade this skill quickly. However, there are also those who refute all the information, so it was definitely not worth ignoring anything, regardless of the complexity, but all the information exactly helped our main character. By the time he was reading through the entire society, he could see the door leading to the goblin trench in front of him. There were so many of them sitting there that it was even a little scary. At that moment, he decided that all he had to do was sneak through them all without being noticed. It was at this moment that he soared his body into the air and attacked one of them. Many goblins began to attack our protagonist, but he was able to activate his wings, beating off all the projectiles flying at him. Of course, the only people who can save their planet, which has turned into a living hell, are the training players. This is the reason why our main character didn't want to miss the opportunity to become stronger, faster, and more determined. He simply had to pass this game. By then, we're back to the poor people in the guild. They asked for pity on them, which their leader liked very much. He knew that the waiting room on the first floor of the light level of difficulty was completely his, and then the second floor was just around the corner. The head immediately asked his guys to deal with those who had raided along with the scum that was next to them. But the head did not spare anyone, he only continued to mock them. He believed that everything would be completely his own. By that time, our main character simply realized that he could not get used to his daily routine, even though it had already been quite a long time since the beginning of his goblin hunt. Of course, the goblins also did not stand still. They were able to recreate the trenches, as well as make themselves an incredible amount of weapons. However, even so, none of them posed the slightest threat to our Ho, because he can now repel all their arrows with the help of wings and magic. He was able to approach them in the air while using his wings as cover. It was very easy. After all, he didn't take any damage from them. But the shield was already running out of time anyway, so it should have been stopped in the waiting room, but you just couldn't go back there all the time. So it only meant that once he passed the fourth floor, he would need to change both his shield and sword. Of course, he was relying on the skills he received from the gods, but after a few days of fighting, he had already acquired a bunch of different skills, so the skills that were previously on Kativna were actively upgraded. And this only means that it is better not to repeat the same actions, but to use all your combat potential. He's mostly just dodging arrows right now, so it's likely that his combat skills have improved since he's been fighting a lot. But do the gods' skills interfere with leveling up? However, it was at this moment that he noticed that a new monster appeared behind him that looked much different from everyone else. They were all similar, but there was still a smaller one in front of him now. This orc moved much faster than any of the previous ones, and the power of its strike was even greater. Did this goblin's punch just teleport away? Sure enough, Ho decided to use his battle concentration, and then, after receiving a few more hits from the orc, he started attacking as well. Of course, the orc wasn't a timid type either, it also knew how to dodge and parry. So if our protagonist gets hit one more time, it's definitely a different world. It was decided to use wings, which scared the orc very much at first, and then just made him dodge. This all made it clear that most likely the orc saw all the actions of our character. Our main protagonist decided to wait a bit and think through his plan of action. He realized that the fist only strikes when it glows red, and no matter how you look at it, it should definitely be a skill. And what skill can you use without restrictions? At this moment, the orc charged again, so our hero simply had no choice but to also rush forward and start throwing their knives. The orc dodged again, but our protagonist decided to continue his barrage of attacks. The orc was protected from attacks, so the solution was to use skills to break through the enemy's defenses and try to attack them from the blind spot. Ho thought that he already had everything in his pocket, but at the same time, the orc smiled fleetingly and his fist immediately rushed to strike at the face. Of course, this strike was incredibly strong at the moment, even though the orc was in a rather awkward position. Both opponents flew off in different directions. The orc was defeated, so it was only necessary to finish it off, which our hero did. In the end, he got the Goroth stone. Of course, Huo knew that he had miraculously survived, but honestly forcing him to fight an enemy that uses a skill without restriction is very unfair. How did the orcs turn out to be so strong? After defeating this weapon, the level of our main character also increased, which he was very happy about. But what was he supposed to do? Our main character immediately approached the object with water and began to think that goblins are drill sergeants, that they appeared at the very beginning and now they will clearly be stronger than orcs or other goblins. They are strong on all sides, from physical characteristics to skill level. Even the current goblins may be different from the ones that appear on the average difficulty level. Of course, the original plan was that our protagonist would be able to make incredible progress in a short period of time if there were no problems. After all, this was the way he would have been able to complete the training as quickly as possible, but now he can't complete it in a hurry at all, because it was very difficult on the 4th floor, so probably the boss will not be weak either. If you are already challenging our main character's condition, it will be an incredibly reckless act, so first you would need to at least return to the waiting room once you reach your limit, just like at the very beginning of your journey. That's when it would be worth going to the next level. Of course, it was worth understanding that it's not that there are no people who pass the floors above, just that they are all at an average level of difficulty. It seems that someone recently passed the 3rd floor on a difficulty level, so our main protagonist is not moving so slowly. He understood that his method was not wrong, because he would not worry in vain, he would just do what he did before. He knew that talking about the real world made him uneasy, but there were still a lot of skills that he needed to improve. All he had to do was pull himself together and continue on his way. If you're worried about the real world, you should at least give it your all. It was at this point that Ho decided to head back. The 14th day has already arrived. The goddess of slowness was watching her supposed apostle, but our young man was looking at his own. He understood that his growth rate was very fast, because in addition to basic skills, his piercing resistance and thick skin were also increased. But as for the skills from the gods, he already uses Teleria's wings more naturally, while being able to effectively use them for both close combat and defense. It was at this point that it was worth it and it was time to move out. Our main character warmed up and immediately went to destroy goblins. He knew that going back and forth between the waiting room and the 4th floor, he went on a raid twice a day. Raids were easy, but the boss room will definitely be different. Ho's hand immediately reached for the door handle, so that in just a second, he entered a new area. He had entered an incredibly strange area. His mission at this point was to kill the Goblin King, which terrified him. But where was he anyway? Of course, it was clear that he was somewhere in the middle of the mountain, but where should he go now, up it or down? To begin with, our hero decided to go up, where he noticed a huge fort. The walls of this fort were quite large, somewhere around 5 meters, which was quite high. There were also about 20 guards. It only seemed that the only way in was through the main gate, which could only be accessed using Teleria's wings. Our protagonist simply couldn't imagine how other players who didn't have the skills from the gods could clear out this boss room, but it was worth it to go and start their offensive. With the help of the emblem, our main character immediately threw himself over the fortress, along with dealing with all the guards. No one made a sound, which was just as well. Of course, our Parisnad thought that he was very lucky that he was not detected, but still he climbed the wall without too much noise. This was the most attentive omen in stealth games. While he was thinking that he had succeeded, the goblin who was standing right behind him immediately started to sound the alarm. Our main character, of course, tried to deal with him, but it was already too late. He realized that since he had failed, it was time to start the battle. By the time it was morning, our Ho was sitting there thinking that the world he was currently in was incredibly beautiful, that this place actually existed somewhere in the universe. It would be nice to live in such a world, but now was not the time to think about it, because it was time to start dealing with other enemies and goblins. At that time, there were about 32 goblins in this fort, ordinary goblins of the infernal level of difficulty. They weren't as strong as their older brothers, and there weren't many of them, so it was too easy to clear out this fort. But still, our main character couldn't find the Goblin King. It was at this moment that he saw a certain castle surrounded by many walls. This stone structure was quite well arranged. This is definitely not some tribe or city. It looked more like some kind of civilization, which was about 1 day's walk away. There were many forts on the sides, so if our character was surrounded in the process, then he would definitely be finished. There are only 3 places where you can fight, or rather the castle, the city center, and the fort. However, as soon as he thought about it, he immediately noticed that someone was approaching him. It was the horsemen. There were about 20 to 30 of them. At first he was afraid, but then he realized that this was even better because he would understand what they were all capable of. As soon as he overcomes the 4 forts, he will immediately head to the city. He will wreak havoc and defeat all of them. By the time day 17 arrived, a lot of goblins were screaming and were defeated by our protagonist. Ho knew that one of the goblins had shouted something to his men during his attack, and they had galloped away. Most likely, he had arranged for them to warn everyone else and go to the city. This was the reason why it was impossible to let them go. Ho immediately climbed up and found the same riders. He knew, of course, that he had been doing nothing but killing goblins for the past few days, but there was nothing else to do. At first, the goblins sent out a small number of their warriors, but every day they got more and more. So it was for this reason that our main character began to move around different forts and, thanks to his mobility, deal with all the other goblin forces. After several such battles, they began to send 200 soldiers to each fort, and right now Ho was able to destroy the guards in one of the forts and the 200 soldiers who arrived there. It seems that they all thought that they could easily defeat our main character with such a large number and also armed with spears, but when it comes to fighting inside the fort, he can easily defeat 200 goblins thanks to the level that has been increased by as much as 2 times, apparently, but our protagonist was able to become incredibly stronger and faster in just a week. This was probably what the Goblin King, who was monitoring everything, knew about. By that time, most likely the next day, it was possible to notice that a huge group of goblins, about 800 pieces, was approaching our main character. Our character, of course, looked at them and realized that all he had been doing in the past week was killing goblins, so that the number of riders was reduced, and ordinary pedestrians seemed like untrained civilians, recruited in a hurry. Only 1 in 5 is a soldier, so it seems like they're looking for all the men they can find, so it's probably time to go to the castle and wreak havoc. By then, Hero had received a message that the god of dueling was disappointed. Does he really want him to solve problems head-on and get himself killed? God has made it clear that this is the case. Of course, our main character thought about it and knew that he had a bad feeling about this because the god in front of him is evil, so it was probably worth starting. The wings were activated, but the lock was also visible. Our man landed on one of the roofs of the house, but in such a way that he was not noticed. Of course, he thought that as an option, he could just go to actor in them, so that as soon as the security arrived, he would just take off and move to another place. In terms of mobility, he had an advantage at all, but starting a fire in different places was also a good plan, because if the whole city was engulfed in flames, they wouldn't even be able to put it out in time. What if they even have a gunpowder depot? Of course, if everything is so, then our character decided that if you just sow confusion among the goblins, then his plan will become at least 1 unit more. He'll just be able to hide anywhere. Judging by all the observations, there weren't many troops left at all, and those sent to the fort must be the last. If you successfully arrange riots in the city, then our main character will be able to successfully enter the castle. But was it really possible to see a goblin child and his mother in the city now? Were they smiling? What was going on? Why do goblins just do what they eat, enjoy life, and fall in love? Maybe it's an illusion. Is it true that this card was given to the player by the game system? After all, if we assume that this is a real place in the universe, then for them just a monster. A terrifying monster that appeared and started slashing at their fellow humans. This all upset Ho very much, because he remembered everything that he had done, watched as everyone tried to fight to the last breath, looked with hatred, hugged the corpses of their comrades. Of course, our protagonist did not feel the slightest sense of regret. He generally feels incredibly terrible. Ho then tried to calm himself down by saying that the goblins were just an illusion. They would resurrect when he returned to the waiting room. No matter how many times he returns to them, they will live exactly the same life as they do now, because this is all spelled out in the system. But is this really the case? However, as soon as night fell, our character decided that he would not wreak havoc in the city, because he still has time before the arrival of the troops that were sent to the fort. He would go to the castle and kill the king before they arrived. But how do you even find it? Where can an influential person sit, given the structure of the tower? Was it in a window that was boarded up? If this was all the case, then you definitely need to get there. At this moment, the body of our main character flew through the window, where the king himself and his 4 bodyguards were found. Our protagonist used the emblem and immediately got close to the king. The king held out his hand and pretended not to resist. But why? What's wrong with it at all? Why doesn't it do anything? After all, if so, then now our main character is to save the king from pain and all the torments. At the same time, the king's body fell, and many people began to scream. Nothing was clear, but the meaning was clearly understood. Children started running out, and the system said that the test was over. Rewards started being given time after time, and the system started asking whether to give a skill to our main protagonist. Of course, Ho decided to agree and get the skill, which was called Knowledge of the Babylonian Time. There are also goblins whose speech wasn't clear a second ago. They started saying that this was a monster that had taken the lives of their loved ones. But what is happening at all? Is this really such a plot? It was at this moment that the god of adventure blinded Ho's eyes. God Slowness also singled out our main protagonist. What was going on? Where was he going? Why was Kirikiri in front of him? Was she avoiding him? However, at the same moment Kirikiri, that she thought it was all her fault that our hero is angry with her. She begged for forgiveness. However, at this point, our character realized that most likely the Kirikiri were scared because there was a drop of blood on him. However, as soon as Na started looking at her, Kirikiri became even more afraid. But our main character immediately began to say that this is not the case. Of course, he remembered the moment when after reading the notification, his vision went dark and he was forcibly thrown back to where they are now. Can the gods even use their powers on him? Is that even possible? But why did the gods do this at all? Why was the god of slowness furious? What does it mean? Of course, he immediately told Kirikiri that he had a lot of questions because what was going on? After all, if you consider that he did not ask the question in the past times, then now he can decently ask so. So his first question was to tell them as much as possible about the gods. It was at this point that Kirikiri said that the gods were interested because they wanted to see if you were qualified to become their apostle. The word was unintelligible to Ho, but Kirikiri went on to say that it was difficult to attract the gods and even more so to become an apostle. To do this, he must fulfill a condition that no one really knows anything about, but now she is facing an unprecedented case, and one day he will have to make a choice. Our hero was confused, but Kirikiri said that now she will tell you a little about the god of slowness. She said that her abilities are not only the speed of movement of objects or living creatures, but she is someone who floats through the endless flow of time without a single hitch. But what about the god of adventure? Kirikiri said that all the questions were used up, so it's likely that information about the gods is very expensive. At that point, Kirikiri asked if our character understood everything. After all, if not, then you shouldn't have thought so much. At this moment, the eyes of our hero flashed all those goblin faces that were screaming with grief. At this point, we can note that there was a conversation between our protagonist and Kirikiri about them choosing a new weapon. Thanks to her efforts alone, our hero was able to accumulate a lot of things. A lot of swords, blades of different varieties for every occasion. One defied magic, the other was endowed with it. However, there was still another rather strange weapon, the Punisher's pistol. A gun that fired powerful charges that combine gunpowder and magic. The weapon will be destroyed after 5 shots. It was Kirikiri who said that this gun is absolutely necessary for cleaning the 5th floor. Our protagonist even bought a shield. But there was one drawback, or rather, the fact that he spent all his points. At this point, Ho decided that it was time to go to the next stage. Kirikiri wished him good luck and told him to buy her echoes next time. By that time, our main protagonist was already in the waiting room. He knew he couldn't remember the faces and names of the people they'd met in the waiting room on the 1st floor, but he definitely needed to clear his mind. But then he thought that it was okay to challenge impulsively, but it was definitely dangerous to fight your enemies without exposing them to your own thoughts. Exactly the same question she asked herself on the 4th floor, are goblins real or not? Of course, they were different from the stinky ones he had imagined. They had their own society, families, and emotions, morals, basic technology skills, and adjurangs. The only thing that made them different from humans was their appearance. However, even if all this was prescribed by training, then all his actions on the 4th floor can be called murder. Of course, our character killed them at his own behest. You couldn't blame the training for their actions. But why did he kill them? Was it because they had attacked him? Of course not. Because the goblins always defended themselves, they only occasionally rushed at him to drive him away. If you look back, you can safely say that the goblins he encountered were focusing on defense. Even in the boss room, they were only concerned about protecting the city. So it was our protagonist who started and finished the battle. It was he who killed them in order to be trained, for they stood in his way. He killed them to get through. So even if he met the goblins again, he would do the same thing, kill them, and move on. Because this place isn't a game. Of course, our main character has heard that in his real world, monsters kill countless people, so if he becomes stronger here, then when he returns, he can save all these people. Not that it's a noble goal to save all of humanity, but he has family and friends who care about him. He is just worried about them, and he will be able to return home only after completing his training. As long as Keiho only has a good reason, he will just continue to kill his enemies without giving up. After all, he and the goblins are enemies. Yes, of course, our protagonist admits that he attacked them first, but there was no hint of negotiations. Come to think of it, the winner is the one who gets what he wants. Just like when our Ho was a pro gamer. The only difference was that his life was on the line right now. He or the enemy, the one who lost, will die. There was no time to hesitate, he had to do it, or else he would just die. He simply must not hesitate, but he will also try not to forget the fallen. It is these doubts that will never disappear, they will only accumulate, so this problem is so easy to solve. Of course, our character immediately reciprocated Kirikiri's words, which told him not to think so much, because he realized that most likely you can just find an easy answer and not something that you can ignore. But he will definitely not give up, he will not talk about it, just leave this issue for the future. He will ask this question from time to time, so that doubts do not overwhelm him. He realized that there was still quite a lot of time to resolve all the issues. But in the meantime, there were 2 girls from the same guild who definitely wanted to pull something off. They immediately opened their inventory and started sharing food. Of course, many people have not seen what they are doing, because it is illegal to open this inventory without someone's permission. If they found out about this, the punishment would not be long in coming. All players who did not obey this rule were beaten to a pulp. It wasn't so easy to give them all their weapons, but it was too late. However, not a single person in that room still felt bad, because apart from the fact that they didn't know where they were, so they didn't know what they needed to do to become as strong as the people around them. It was at this point that one of the girls was spotted doing what she was doing and immediately grabbed and led into the room. The head said that he would now show the lesson to anyone who disobeyed him. That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.